Hello, my name is John Hammond. Thank you for joining me for this short video about how you can become more confident on camera. My background is radio and television and live presentation, so getting used to cameras is something I've done over the years, and I want to share with you some of the techniques and tips I've learned along the way. I really hope you find it useful. So let's get underway. How to be more confident on camera. Firstly, I don't know about you, but over the last few months, I've seen a lot of ceilings, nostrils, and witness protection. In other words, cameras pointing up at people's ceilings, very close to their nostrils, which isn't all that pleasant, or the witness protection, as I call it, when people have decided that they want to put the light behind them and then their face is totally in darkness. Doesn't quite work well when you're linking with people on camera. The need, though, has never been greater. It's good communicators will succeed in the new world. In fact, let's say great communicators will succeed in the new world. It's the opportunity to really make a difference. As you can see from this, which is a recent Microsoft document, which shows how many people now are online, which is quite staggering. 560 million, 900 million, then March 31st in 2020, 2.7 billion people. And you are probably one of them, which is why you've joined me today. So where are the opportunities in this? Well, firstly, before I talk about the opportunities, let's look at the expectations. If you're a leader or you're someone leading a meeting, the expectations, if you're online doing it through a camera, are greater than ever now, that it'll be professional, it'll be slick, it'll be succinct, and it'll be effective. So the opportunity is there for you to make that difference. It can help careers and ambitions. How do you want it to help your career? What ambition would you like it to fulfill? Being on camera is very much a skill that we can make all the difference with. But it's entirely up to you how much difference you want to make, which is what this video is all about. So let me take you through the various stages I think will make a difference for you, starting with this. Be very clear on what your content is. It's not as though you're just throwing information at people and hoping it works. That doesn't work anymore. People aren't going to sit there. In fact, they have a very interesting little gadget called an off button, which they can put into place very, very quickly. You don't want that to happen. So can I suggest you're very clear on your content and understand who your audience are. If you want to be really effective, you have to know who your audience are. If you're just broadcasting or scattergun or shotgun, however you want to call it, at people, you won't be as effective. If you understand who they are, then you'll know what you want to get, and more importantly, what you want that outcome to be. Do you know what your outcome is before you start something? Do you understand where you're heading towards? If you understand where you're heading towards, it means you can map the journey out. So who's your audience? First question. What will be your ideal outcome? So before you start anything else, make a note of both of those and be very clear about where you want it to go. Then keep it very simple, because if it's simple and easy to understand, there's more chance that people will get it, understand it. And the other thing I would suggest you do is use stories, because if you're using stories, it brings it to life for people, and storytelling is one of these skills. It's not for kids. We talk in stories all the time. If you're saying to a friend of yours, where have you been, where are you going, whatever, you then put descriptive stories into place which bring it to life for people. So wherever you can, use good stories to bring things to life. The next stage is being in the right mindset for it. This is before you even get near the camera. Are you in the right mindset for it? Are you in your confidence zone? Now, a lot of the cameras we'll use are at home or in the office, and you have to get comfortable with the circumstances around that camera and being there in the same room. So it's not this strange object there, it's something you're comfortable with. So get used to talking to a camera. I'll suggest some practicing things a little later on, and make it part of your comfort zone for that. Beware the what ifs. What if I look stupid? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I do the wrong thing? What will people think of me? That's the little earworm that gets inside our head. You know, the emotional earworm that says, you're not good enough, you might not be good at this, so therefore, why bother? Well, that doesn't get you anywhere, does it? It doesn't get you to your outcome you want to achieve. So understand if the what-ifs creep up, look at them for what they are. It's purely your emotional side of your brain kicking in and saying, be careful. Yeah, you can say, yeah, I'll be careful, but I'm going to go for it and see what it looks like. And that's the bit that can make the difference. Avoid pedestalization. Now, pedestalization is a word I made up. Meatloaf, the singer, taught me it. That's a story for another time. But simply pedestalization means that if you put people, circumstances, situations on a pedestal, you can tend to put yourself down. And that doesn't do you any favours. It doesn't do the people you're communicating to any favours either. So avoid, recognize it, that you might put people on pedestals, and then avoid it and be very comfortable with the situation. Be yourself, for me, is key. I always suggest people be themselves, because if you're yourself, you can be comfortable. Be the same person you'd be in the pub or in the cafe having a chat with people, having a chat with friends, because that is really powerful when it comes to going on camera and chatting to people too. Let's stop and think about your brand. What do you want your brand to be? And when I say your brand, how people perceive you. I think it was Jeff Bezos from Amazon who said, your brand is what people say about you when you leave the room. Powerful stuff, but what you want it to be. And the first suggestion I would make is make the first impression. Yeah, what impression do you want that to be? Is it of someone not quite ready for their conversation on camera? Is it someone who's slightly scruffier? We'll talk about that in a second or two. Is it someone who's mentally not in the right place for it? If you're not, make sure you are before you switch that camera on in the first place. Secondly, what's behind you? I know it sounds a little bit like musical or pantomime, what's behind you, but that can make a serious impression on people too. If you, like me, have been looking at lots of people on camera recently and look at their bookshelves and seeing what they've got, it might or might not make the right impression, but have a quick look behind you to see if it is where you want it to be. Thirdly, you are what you wear. What impression do you want to make? If you've just rolled out of bed with your Winnie the Pooh pajamas on and you haven't bothered with your hair or had a shave, or you haven't got any makeup on, or whatever it may be, is that the impression you want to give? Is that the impression you want them to walk away with? So maybe something you can do about that, just to make sure you're in the right place for that. And here's a little suggestion, because it's the quality of what you do will show and tell in every time. In fact, let me share this little idea with you, because it's something that I use quite a lot. And these days, it's one of these, which is a little video mic, which can go in a telephone, on a smartphone, and it's a lavalier mic, right? Lavalier microphone. It's quite cheap on Amazon, 15, 16 quid. But the quality level you'll find is quite astounding. The difference in quality level. So I'd invest in one of those. I have here a full kit. So I've got a full camera and a full lavalier mic and the screens and everything else. You don't need all that. You can do just as well with that. The other thing I'd suggest you invest in too is one of these, which is a little smartphone holder, which is a tripod, or it's something you can grip and you can actually use as you're walking around. It just gets that little level of extra professionalism that will make all the difference. You could invest in one of those things on the top right, which is a Yeti by Blue. That's a USB microphone. Again, always better than the microphone that's in your laptop or on your computer. So do consider that, because it's well worth considering. Now, let's get to this bit of working with the camera. This camera is this strange thing that's in your office or your living room or whatever, and it's something that you need to get kind of used to and working with and having a conversation with. And that, for most people, is unusual. Do you remember when people were kids, or when the family around and someone comes out with the camera and they go, "Oh no, get away from me"? It's just the mind saying, no, that's a bit dangerous. We've got to get over that and get used to having the idea of having a camera in front of us that we can relate to. So let's have a look at some tips that might be useful for you to use when it comes to that. Firstly, are you talking to me? Again, the danger is recently that people are looking in all sorts of directions. So they're looking over there, they're looking over there. They're looking at the picture on the screen, not looking at you. And whilst we put up with that quite a lot, I think for the people who want to be the best, want to be great at it, it's about how you connect through this screen, which will make a difference for you. So don't look over there or don't look over there. Try and look straight there. Here's a little tip for you. I use these little post-it notes, tiny post-it notes, right, just like that. And I put it next to the camera lens. I've already got one there, which reminds me where to look. So if it's on your laptop and you're not quite sure, start doing a video, find the camera lens with your finger, put one of these on top of it, then you know exactly where to look throughout it. It's the same for mobile phones. A lot of people will do mobile phones and they'll sort of record it to the center of the mobile phone, whereas on mine, the camera is there in that bottom corner. So find out where it is, put something on it, and then get into the habit of looking at that lens and getting comfortable with the lens. And I'll suggest something for you in a second, how to get more comfortable with that lens. And that is your peripheral vision. Get used to using your peripheral vision. So rather than sort of staring at the screen or staring at the camera, stare at the camera, or not stare, but be comfortable with the camera and use your peripheral vision to let you know what's going on. So if you have slides or anything else, you see those in the corner of your eye and get used to it. Because once you get used to it, you can do it far more. Talk to someone, not something. The camera is a thing, not a person. And we've got to get used to the idea of actually being able to talk to someone as a person. Now, Olivia Newton-John, who you just saw a picture of, was my inspiration. When I first started years ago in commercial radio, I was doing the overnight show. And in many walks of life, if you sat in a room and talked to yourself for 4 hours, the little gentleman in white coats and straitjackets would come along and take you away. In my world of radio, they paid you for it, which is quite strange, but I found it very hard to relate. I was sitting there in a studio talking to myself with just a microphone, no one around to relate to. And I'm sure you may have had the same thing. With a camera, you can't relate to it unless you can kind of think of the person behind it. So what do? I found an album cover, because it was those days, we were still playing vinyl, of Olivia Newton-John, and I put it in front of me in the radio studio, and I talked to Olivia for 3 weeks, every night. Now, she's never rung since, she's never called, in fact she never even knew, but it worked for me to think, John, you're talking to someone. So what'll work for you? I know some people that put a little picture up next to the camera lens, so they think, right, I'm talking to someone. In their mental eye, they have a picture of the person they're talking to. If it's one-to-one, it's much easier to do. It's a group, you've kind of got an idea of you're talking to a person, and that camera becomes the outline of a person. Don't stare right into the lens, because that's a bit kind of weird, but you know, the triangle of the face we normally look at, try and make that the triangle of the camera as well. So you take the camera in as if you're talking to a person. And then when you get used to talking to that, in the television world, we talk to inanimate objects all the time, cameras. So any inanimate object you can have a conversation with, and no matter where that inanimate object goes, you can still have that conversation. That's how we got used to talking to cameras. But you can do the same thing. So whether it's putting a picture up, whether it's having someone in vision that you can recognize, whatever, do that if it makes it more comfortable for you, because that will help you to connect through the camera. The other thing I would suggest you do, which is well worth doing, is practicing. You probably have a smartphone. Go out, buy yourself a little microphone, because that will give you a better quality and maybe a little something to hold it with, that little stand I showed you before, and then go out and practice. And maybe do it as you would normally do it straight away. And then think about some of the things we'll talk about on this video, about how you can raise the bar. So practice, practice, practice. I promise you, will make a great deal of difference. Let's talk about body language. Body language, when it comes to being on camera, is how people get you instantly. For instance, the first impression. What's your posture like? What's your posture like at the moment? Are you slouching? Try lifting an inch. Just sit, you know how to do it. It's we get out of the habit. So lift your posture a little bit. Look attentive when you're on camera. Also, find the eye level of the camera. Not up or down or sideways, but get your eyes on the same level as the camera, whether that means putting books under your laptop to lift it, or whether it means getting a little stand to put it on, but have eye line to the camera, because that can make a huge deal of difference, because it becomes very more personal then. People say to me, John, what do I do with my hands? Well, as my day job, if you like, I go around the world coaching leaders to stand on stage and feel comfortable, or be in front of the television cameras and feel comfortable. And a lot of them say, what shall I do with my hands? And I say, well, how long you had them is always an interesting question. But then what would you do normally with your hands? If you're an expressive person, still be expressive with your hands. Not too much. Don't get carried away. Always remember, there is a limit to how much room you have to express with your hands. If I do something like that, it's as though I've got a puppet the other side, you can't see it. But be expressive within that. Don't cover your face up. But if you're someone who uses their hands to express themselves, as I do, please feel free to use them. Between using them, just rest them on the desk, or rest them on one hand resting on the other. Just be comfortable, because then that makes the deal of difference that you're not distracting, but it is adding to you on camera so people can see you. And that's the important thing. Next one, body language. In the body language series, the leaning tower pizza. Yeah, you got it in one. And that's my little suggestion. A slight lean in technique is actually very, very powerful. So rather than sit rigid and straight up, your posture's good, but rather than sit rigid and straight up, how about just a little, almost imperceptible lean in? And if you really want to be engaged, tip your head slightly to one side. The royal family do that, interestingly. If you watch them, they lean in slightly and they put their head to one side because it shows someone is listening. It's a body language technique to show someone is listening to you, but it's very powerful, not just in person, but actually when you're on a camera as well. So you can actually listen to that person really intently, and actually you're showing it at the same time. So the lean-in technique's a useful one. Let's move on now to using your voice. Now, most people are not used to using microphones because they kind of get used to the idea of, it's a strange thing, the microphone world. But there are things you can do these days when we have to be on camera far more with your voice to make a difference. Firstly, avoid the monotone. If I started this video by saying, hello, my name is John and I'm going to talk, you'd have turned off by now, you'd have gone. So we have to make it orally interesting, getting a little bit of variation in your voice, going up and down a little bit, just giving that, that kind of modulation effect. So if you can go up and go down. Yeah? Australians have a natural one. For a lot of Australian friends, they go up at the end of every sentence. Hello, good day, how are you doing? Oh, well, that's a good idea. And it always sounds like a question. Yeah, it's a kind of natural habit they've got into. Whereas the late broadcaster Terry Wogan in the UK used to talk like that and finish on the end. And everything he'd say would suddenly go down at the end. That was a habit he got into too. But you can get into whatever habit you want, as long as it's not monotone. Play with your voice. Again, practice on camera, play with your voice, do the ups and the downs and try it out. And even get friends to notice it. Do a video as you would normally be, but then do one with some of these techniques and see the sort of difference that has made. Bring a bit of modulation into it. And you can emphasize with the volume, raising and lowering the volume to make points. So when I'm on stage, I will lower my voice slightly and people are drawn into that. Or if I want to make a real point, I will be a bit louder. Not extremes again, but subtle differences can make all the difference. And then get used to using your speaking voice muscles. There's a story behind this that a few years ago, and this might be hard to believe if we don't know each other, but I used to be a DJ in Europe. I was on the European circuit, and I got a contract in Luxembourg at a nightclub, which I'm told is still there, and this is many years later, called the Royal Bugatti. But in Luxembourg, they had a radio station which was infamous for many, many years, which was Radio Luxembourg, the Great 208. Maybe before your time, but it was a fabulous station. And the DJs on the station would go down to bar 13, which is above the Wimpy Bar in Luxembourg, don't know if it's still there, and they would have a drink there. And I used to go in there too. And I got to know a few of them, which was lovely. And they were all very generous guys, very helpful. And there was one particular chap called Dave Christian, who had this beautiful, deep, rich voice. He was the guy that got me into radio, because he said to me, do you want to come in and see what radio's like? I said, yeah. And for another time, I'll tell you that story. It's a lovely story. But he got me involved in radio, got me the bug. But also, so I said to him, how do you get such a deep, rich voice? He said, try breathing through 2 straws. I said, what? He said, yeah, try breathing through 2 straws. When you think about it, when we speak, either we can do with a lot of air coming out, in which case it's a little bit like that, which tends to make our voice go slightly higher. We become a bit breathless and we have to get more breath in. Or we lessen the amount of air coming out and just let the volume come out instead. In fact, you can half stop breathing and still get volume to come out. I'm not suggesting you do that. Health and safety wouldn't like it. But get the idea of it's noise coming out, not air coming out. So breathing through the 2 straws limited the amount of air I was getting to get me into the habit of doing it. It's a really interesting technique, worth trying, because then when you limit the air, opera singers put a candle in front of them and sing to a camera. Sorry about that. But if the camera isn't flickering, then they're getting it just about right, because they're getting the noise out there, but saving some of that air to be able to work their muscles with. And you can work the muscles down here. Once you get into less air coming out, starting to use the diaphragm, and any singer will tell you that's the important bit, then you can get into the deep, rich areas. And as you can see, I've slipped into my voiceover voice. And I'm not saying you need to do that. And it's not a sexy thing. Male, female, applies to everybody. You can bring your voice down if you want to. Margaret Thatcher was quite a famous one who did that in history, who brought her voice down from quite a strident, high-pitched voice to a very mellow voice. Not making any political comments, but you can do it if you want to do it. So, how about doing those? Avoid the monotone, make it interesting with modulation, emphasize with volume, and explore your speaking voice muscles. It can give you a little bit more gravitas. But one thing you need to do with that is the speed you speak at, because if you do it too quickly, you lose any gravitas you had, which brings me nicely on to energy. When you're on camera, especially if you're by yourself doing your side of a meeting or you're doing a presentation, you need to have a little bit more energy than you normally would. If you're doing something sitting at home and you're there in your favorite chair and you're very relaxed and you slouch, it's not going to bring energy to it at all. So you need to bring a bit more energy. Now, I learnt the hard way that being online by yourself in the studio is difficult, so you have to lift that energy level a little bit. No one wants to hear someone, well, it was like this and then it was like that. No one wants that. They want someone who'll give a bit of energy into it. And if you can, really pick it up, but be excited, not excitable. If you get too excitable, like a puppy running around, people lose interest as well quite quickly. But you can be excited and interesting, and that will bring people into you. Passion is powerful, okay? Using passion, and when I say passion, people expect to be, hey, with the arms raising all over the place. No, it's not. Passion can be quite quiet to do. I know some lovely passionate people who are not noisy, but they are passionate. So maybe bring that into it a little. Bring your passion, whatever your normal passion is like, lift your energy level, and you've got a really good combination. So what are your next steps on this before we finish our little video today? Well, firstly, consider this as another skill set. Down the years, you've learnt all sorts of different skill sets, whether that is Word or Excel, whatever. They're skill sets. So is appearing on camera. Unlike having to learn a new skill set, you have to put the time into it. You have to put the effort into it. Otherwise, it doesn't move any further. And as the famous saying goes, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. I don't think that's you. Also, get the attitude right. You always have a choice in this. If the little earworm is saying to you, no, run away as fast as you can, you don't want to do this, beat it, come back on it and say, no, actually, I have a choice to do this. I have a choice to want to be better at what I do and how I do it. And I can see that being on camera strongly confidently is going to make a huge deal of difference. Now, people say to me, is there a quick fix, John? I said, yes, I've got a pill for that. Habitude. Not a real pill, obviously, but it's a combination of habits and attitude. If you've got the right habit and the right attitude, it's an unbeatable combination. So create the right habits you want. That could be slowing your voice down. It could be not breathing out as much, working on your breathing. It could be just thinking who your audience is. It could be thinking the habit of the outcome first, which is one of my habits. I always think, what do I want the outcome to be? And that's always a good start point. So please do keep in touch. The website you see on the right there is john-hammond.com. Various tips and techniques on there, but also a little bit about what I do and how I do it and who I do it with. But also on the left-hand side, there's my YouTube channel with lots of little videos like this. So we've got the art of business storytelling, the art of self-confidence conundrum, inspiring your audience from a distance, all this stuff which hopefully will really help for you. And there's one called Getting Bosses Buy-in, and these were live Zoom videos I did online, so I hope you find them useful. Please do keep in touch. All the details are there. There's also a book which I wrote called Pond Life, which you might find useful. That's on Amazon. And in the meantime, if you want to join me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or on YouTube, or any of the other ones, I'd be delighted if you can. Keep in touch. I hope today's been really useful for you. Bye-bye.